When high school football season came around, one voice often heard on KTIB was Steve Caldarera. Let's hear his memories of sports broadcasting. Steve Caldarera, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine, William. Thank you.
Well, let's start from the beginning. Are you from our area originally?
I'm not from far away. I mean, I grew up on the Mississippi River at St. John the Baptist Parish on the west side in Wallace, right at the base of the Wallace Gramercy Bridge, and went to grammar school in that area, and middle school at Old Edgewater High School. But I ended up finishing my last 3 years of high school in Donaldsonville at Ascension Catholic.
All righty. Now tell me, growing up, was broadcasting always an interest of yours?
It always was, and I was always intrigued. I think the first sport that I came to love was baseball, and what was intriguing to me was to listen on the old AM radio stations and listen to the Jack Bucks on KMOX in St. Louis. And Harry Carey used to do St. Louis Cardinal baseball games as well. And then later on, Houston Colt 45s when they were an expansion team, and Gene Elston Lowell Pass and Harry Callis, and picked up on and just was entertained by the way play-by-play announcers described the game. And then later on, football play-by-play became more of a passion, and basketball play-by-play. And I actually got a tape recorder for Christmas when I was approximately, I'd say, 13 years old, right in the area. And then I started doing what I hear a lot of the announcers that do this for a living now did. I would watch a television game and do the play-by-play on my tape recorder. And that was always so much fun to do. And then ultimately I had opportunities to do this somewhat professionally, although it never was my profession.
Okay. Now, did you also go to college?
I graduated from Nichols State University in 1975. Sure did, and I worked at KTIB radio there, and enjoyed several years of working shifts and learning the inner workings of a radio station.
Okay. Did you have any other broadcasting jobs besides what you just mentioned before you came into KTIB?
Yeah, I did. I worked in Houma for KTIB and KHOM's competitor. And I did that for several years, and then I was actually in advertising sales, but I got to dabble in sports and news, and I actually did newscasts and sportscasts, and borrowed a lot of things I listened and learned from the network announcers, and then later on, after I got into got away from the actual radio stations I worked for, and then ultimately got into the financial services business. I kept relationships with the radio stations, ultimately KTIB to do high school football broadcasts. It's been a wonderful run.
So what was your first year at KTIB?
I think it was 1987, if I'm right about the season. Barry Melanson, who's now the president of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, was then the executive director of the CPA Society in Louisiana, and he was the color analyst. And he would drive from Destrehan, where he lived, to Nichols State, or to meet me to go on a road trip. And we filled in at the last minute when Roy Pugh, discontinued his tenure at KTIB and did that one season. Phil Greco was the head football coach and athletic director at Nichols, and it was so much fun to do college football. And that was the one season I did it. The following year, I started doing high school broadcasts at KTIB.
Okay, now, of course, first of all, before I forget, how'd you get linked up with KTIB? Was it through Mr. Sadie?
Absolutely. I had a relationship, from, I guess, the radio side, the professional side, with Raymond Hume for years, and we kept, constant communication, and he asked me if I would, at least take over as the play-by-play announcer for Nichols football that one season. And then Darren Fox came in full-time, and then he asked me if I would take over the high school play-by-play, which, I had absolutely no problem with and was honored to do.
Well, one gentleman you worked with in broadcasting for a good while, we have to mention and kindly say a few words about Marvin Dugas.
Yep, Marvin Dugas, and there'll be another one that I'll mention as well in the high school broadcast, but without a doubt, some of the best times ever traded in the broadcasting of high school football games was with the Big Ragu, Marvin Dugas from Donna, Louisiana, and we had some wonderful times. I could write a book on things that we did together, and particularly that he did. He was extremely knowledgeable in high school football from each corner of the state on down, and he knew the coaches, he knew the players' names, he knew the Class A, Single A teams that were going to be tough that season. When we got to the playoffs and we discussed the brackets, it was absolutely no problem to fill in the time to talk about the potential of these teams, because he was so extremely knowledgeable. I would just set him up, and of course Marvin did a great job. And what a character!
So all the years you worked with Marvin sound pretty exciting. Along the years, all the games that y'all did together, are there any memories either with you and Marvin, or memories of certain games you watched that seem to stand out?
I'll tell you what stood out, and this was not a close football game. This was one of the classic moments. It was an unusual late season football game. It was a regular season game. Thibodeau High had a particularly good team, and it was after their state championship year, because Robert Prejean had been doing the color with me, and I just want to mention his name. Robert did play-by-play as well for KHOM and KTIB, and did a fabulous job, and we just had a great time as well. But yeah, in the next season or so, Marvin and I had to do a game. It was Thibodeau High and East St. John at Thibodeau High, Tiger Stadium. And Thibodeau won that game going away. I mean, they trounced East St. John. I'll never forget. But going into the game, unusual was the fact that a cold front had moved in. It was bitterly cold. It was about 45 degrees at game time. And I remember reading the weather forecast and telling everybody that it will go down into the upper 30s before the night is over. And Marvin came into the broadcast booth, and I was going into the game, and I was just so amused because he had on a short sleeve white LSU insignia T-shirt. Oh, well, it was like a collared T-shirt, and he had gold LSU coaching pants, short pants. And so when I went into the beginning of the broadcast, that particular game, I said, folks, it's a great night. Thibodeau High is playing great football. Fans are here. It's a packed house. Lots of anticipation going on, and Marvin Dugas wearing a short sleeve shirt and coaching pants, and Marvin comes right in and he says, "That's right, Stephen," and I'm about ready to take my shirt off. I'm so fired up. And it was one of the funniest moments I had ever experienced in broadcasting, but it just showed the passion he had, not only for broadcasting, but just for being there and being part of high school football.
Now, if I can be a little biased towards the city of Thibodaux, I believe if this was the same year, 1991 was the year Thibodaux won their first ever statewide championship, which happened to be the first year the 5A classification got started. I'll go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's the most memorable year, but Robert Prejean was the color analyst, and we did, as far as we're concerned, unprecedented in our short careers or part-time careers as radio play-by-play and color analysts on high school football. We did the championship in the Superdome of the Class 4A game, which was South Terrebonne, and they were winning, I think it was 17-15 over Crowley behind David Butler, who had a long run in that game and set up the Gator victory that night under Coach Richard Curlin. And then right after that game, we went right into the pregame of the Thibodaux High Neville State Championship game, which Thibodaux High won on a field goal by Constant, a young man, I can't remember his first name.
David.
David. And well, that's it. And it was just a fabulous night, 6 hours on the air, and Robert and I just had a total blast. But that was the first Class 5A state championship as well, so it was an honor and a privilege to do that.
And I take it over the years that and I know you've done a lot of high school broadcasts, since departing from KTIB. It sounds like something that I take it Friday nights would never be the same if it wasn't for high school football, correct?
Well, it would be, and this season I've done nothing related to broadcasting high school games, so it's been a little bit unusual. In fact, I worked in the concession stand where my son goes to high school, and that happens to be Vanderbilt Catholic, and that is totally unusual for me without being able to watch the game constantly. it was just so natural to go into the press box, get set up, and get focused completely on the task at hand, and that was to be totally prepared to sound, rational and decent on the radio station while promoting the schools, the young men who were playing the game, and the coaches. And we were very careful, and Marvin was very good at this. We could question the officiating sometimes and think, not what we would have called, but we tried in high school because amateur athletics not to act as though we knew it all and that they were doing a completely wrong thing. The other thing was the coaches had a job to do, and you didn't want to put down, certainly what they were doing, and then ultimately you definitely did not want to put down a young man who was fighting his heart out there for his high school playing football.
Very kind gentleman you worked with by the name of Troy Johnson. In 2002, you worked with him on local television, and you happened to be the first television voice for the Bayou Bucks of our National Indoor Football League franchise. I'm sure that was a lot of fun as well.
It was a blast, and I had no idea what was going to be coming at us, because you had a football field with the 25-yard line as midfield, and you had to learn, a completely new game. And it was kind of on-the-job training for both Troy and I. But again, an extremely pleasurable experience, and what fun to work with Troy. We had a blast. With television, you have to watch the monitor to see what's being shown while you're talking over it. So it's more of a challenge there. And we'd see familiar faces out there, and Troy and I would talk about these people attending these games and some of the outfits they have on, and we would just chuckle and have a great time.
Now, of course, before we go, when I brought that up, there's one memory that comes to mind, in particularly when you and Troy had to sound like Boyd Pierce and Cowboy Bill Watts of Mid-South Wrestling, and that was the fight against Winston-Salem. I mean, all the years I followed the sport, I've never seen a fight any crazier, and I'm sure when y'all had to call that for local TV, that was probably a pretty shocking experience as well.
And that was. Up until that time, I can tell you that I did some radio broadcasts back in the late 70s, and when there was unfortunately racial strife at a local high school, and the game was played at daytime, and there was a lot of tension in the stadium, but the game went off without a problem. This was a case where the game went off with a problem, and Winston-Salem and the home of Bayou Bucks hooked up in a huge fight, and we were flabbergasted that the game was going to stop with just a minute or so remaining in the third quarter. And it seemed like the fight was continuing as they walked down the halls to the dressing rooms. And so we started to be concerned about walking down from our perch, when we were questioning our safety, because we had to walk into the direction of where those football players were.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you what, Steve, it's really been great going over all these wonderful memories with you of especially high school football. Is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners before we go?
I wanted to say that the routine of going pick up the equipment and seeing Miss Marie Bergeron and just having a wonderful conversation with her and going over the day's events and what's happening in Thibodaux and the Houma area, and then Raymond Sadie as well. I'm very thankful to him for the opportunity to do those things. All those guys and a few gals that worked the board while we were doing the game. Sometimes we were very there was a lot of tension. Maybe our line wasn't right or the phone hookup wasn't good. And appreciate everything them putting up with us all these years. It was just a pleasure. And if it wasn't fun, and I tell this to people all the time because they'll ask me about it, why did you do it, or and you did it for so long. And if it wasn't fun, I would have never done it. It was a pleasurable experience, and I always had a great time working with the different color analysts I worked with.
Steve Caldarera, another part of KTIB's hardworking alumni.